How would you like to create your own pension? Something that you can control. We're going to have a conversation about the income floor and how you could think of it being your own pension. We're going to have this conversation with the one and only Coach Carson. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, Michael? Thanks for having me.
Hey, the income floor is a topic that you have covered a couple of times in your amazing books, most recently with the Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor. Why don't, for the folks who haven't gotten it, shame on you. Why don't you tell us what it is and we'll move from there?
So this is an idea I actually borrowed from a non-real estate guy, as a blogger named Darrow Kirkpatrick over at caniretireyet.com. But the idea is that, a lot of people when they retire or they're wanting to transition to financial freedom, having a steady, safe, consistent source of cash flow, basically to replace your salary, because we get used to this salary. It's nice to have monthly salary, weekly salary, whatever it is. And being an entrepreneur or being early retired or being retired period it creates some anxiety. Like, where's my money going to come from? And so this idea is that you create essentially a floor, something that you can't go below. You can build off of this, you can steady. And in the traditional world, people used to have pensions. Anybody heard of those pensions before? Not many people have those things anymore. Yeah, I heard they were a thing one day. There's some military people who still get it and I'm thankful that they get it. And there's a few rare corporate pensions out there. But the idea was you would get this steady income each and every month for the time you worked before. But the thing is, an income floor is something you can create in real estate as well. And you can do it pretty simply. I'm biased, and I know you are too, for small residential properties. But you can create a single family house income floor. You can have small multifamilies. There's some people who get into commercial real estate and do the same thing. But the point I want to make is that it's a different mindset than the mindset that got you to build wealth in the first place. Because when you build wealth, you're using leverage, you're scaling, you're getting bigger. But actually building an income floor is a different mindset, because you have to make the decision to take chips off the table and reprioritize. Instead of just maximizing growth and return on investment, you're prioritizing optimizing your life and your sleep at night score so that you have income coming in. So what you might do is you might sell a few properties, some of the excess properties you have, and use some of those to pay off the debt on some of your keeper properties, some of the ones you really like, the best, easiest to rent, longest term properties. We've talked about this here on the show before, of finding those properties that are really easy to manage, that attract your best tenants, that stay the longest time. You don't want to sell those because those are your best assets. And if you want to take it a step further, though, you can pay off some properties, which I like to do. I'm not saying you have to pay everything off, but this little, like, carving out this income floor in your portfolio. Let's say, for example, you had 5 properties that each one of them rent for $1,800, $2,000. But when they net after all your expenses, after management, maintenance, taxes, insurance, capital expenses, all that stuff, let's say they netted $1,000 per month. 5 properties times $1,000, 5,000 per month, $60,000 per year. That's a floor that you can depend on. You can use that. And you could even, another mentor that I've followed for a long time, named Mike Cantu, he's down in Southern California. He used to assign each of his properties, the income from that property, towards some part of his life, some expense in his life. So he'd say, property number 1, rental number 1, that's going to cover my health insurance. Or in my case, I need like 2 or 3 properties to cover my health insurance because it's so expensive. Property number 2 might cover my grocery bills and eating out. Property number 3 might be my travel. And so the point is, you work your real estate portfolio around your life. You make it low risk. You make it steady. You make it pension-like. And then I think the thing a lot of people miss is like, oh, you're going to, miss out on all this growth and all this opportunity. Well, it's just a floor. Like, you can still grow, you can still build off the floor, but man, the psychology and the peace of mind that you have when you've built that floor, that you can't go back, you're not going to slide back down the hill of the wealth building. That's an amazing feeling. So I just wanted to make sure people get this concept of an income floor.
Let's talk about it some more, because I want to build on it, because I think it's a very important concept. So when you're looking at an income floor, Chad, really it's do you set it up, or do you kind of eyeball it when you're starting, or is this more, hey, I'm near the end, how can I manage the portfolio, sell one, pay off, whatever, to create the income floor? When does the idea of an income floor first should be thought about?
Yeah, I think you can get the number early on, but as I've grown, I think you spend a lot less time in the beginning thinking about planning for the details of the end, because you and I both know how much things change and how many times you pivot. But if you're just starting, I think it'd be really helpful to look at your own bills and look at your own budget and say, you know what, if I had $10,000 a month coming in, that would be good. Or if I
Mhm.
had 20,000 bucks or 5,000, like just have a rough number. You don't need to be exact with this. That's all you need to do, because then you at least have a goal. You're saying, all right, at some point I want to get 10,000 bucks, or maybe some percentage of that. Maybe I can get to 5,000 bucks first and then 10,000 bucks. Like that's the starting point, but you don't know how that's going to come together, because real estate's going to change, your portfolio is going to change. But as you grow, so like 5 years in, 10 years in,
Yeah.
you have these properties. I think that's the time to get strategic. And I've had dozens and dozens of these calls one-on-one with people, where we actually look at their portfolio and say, we evaluate it. We say, all right, which one of your properties are your keepers? Which ones are the best? They're the most optimal, most efficient rentals. They attract the best tenants. And you make a list, and you do what's called pruning your portfolio, where you
Mhm.
prune off the ones that are not that optimal. Maybe you have a lot of equity in them. They look good on paper, but man, are they a lot of trouble, or they're just a pain, or they have a debt coming due and you having to pay a balloon note or something. So you prune off some properties, sell those, use some of that. You can do a 1031 exchange and grow more. That's like the optimal way to grow. But what I'm talking about here is being willing to maybe just pay the tax and pay
Mhm.
your long-term gains tax,
Yeah.
and then use that capital to pay something off.
No, I love the income floor, and I could just relate it to what Olivia and I did. We did exactly what you're talking about. So we were in build mode, because I think you go through phases. So our phase was 15 years of building. Then, life happens and we decide to be done or retire. We go through a year of what you're calling the income floor or pension. So what did we do? We evaluated our portfolio. We sold off a couple of problem properties that never performed up to expectation. We chose to pay taxes on some of those. Others we 1031 into nicer stuff. So we upgraded the portfolio. And then we also, to your point, created a blank pile, right? Which for us is a collection of properties that are owned free and clear, right? We invested through the Great Recession. We saw people lose properties. So we wanted to have a set of properties with no debt, that worst of case, we know that we could keep regardless of anything, to again not slide back down the hill. So I think you're absolutely right. You're going to go through a growth phase. It's going to take 5, 10 years. At some point, you can look at your portfolio and you can play almost like Legos and go, okay, what's my minimum? What's the floor? And then that becomes your pension. And then you could decide, hey, am I good, or do I need to keep growing more? I think that's a wonderful way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think you're giving yourself permission to do the thing that you set out to do in the first place, which is to reevaluate your life and decide, what do you want to do with your time? Because once you have a pension, once this is an amazing thing. Like once you break the tie between your efforts and your time and the
Mhm.
amount of money you make, it's wide open. It's like
Yeah.
completely open to what you want to do. And I know you and I both talked about the psychological challenge of that sometimes, of being wide open. That's a whole nother story. But I feel like this is the name of the game. Like this is when you were 15, you were 18, you were
Mhm.
20, when you were young and optimistic. Maybe some of you are 18 or 20, good for you, that you had dreams. You're like, what am I going to do
Yeah.
with my life? Like, who am I going to be when I grow up? Well, this is the opportunity. Like when you take chips off the table and you break the ties between your time and your money, like anything is
Yeah.
possible. And it's amazing. Like my wife right now, she is a Spanish teacher. She loves foreign languages. She's dabbled in going back to the university professor role. She's teaching at university, teaching at community colleges. But every time she does, she's like, gosh, all these committee work and this, it's a pain in the, I like the teaching in between right here, but all that other crap, I hate it.
Yeah.
And so we're like, well, you don't need to do it, Carrie. Like we're financially independent. Do what you want to do. And so she teaches English one-on-one to people now, to people who are immigrants in the country or refugees.
Oh,
Like she
wow.
teaches them, and they can't pay her enough money. I mean, it's like they don't have the money, or they pay a little bit, but she's not trying to get wealthy from that, because
Right.
you own your time. You
Yeah.
choose to do what, number one, you're passionate about. Number two, where there's a need. And I'm really passionate about this, is like not all the things we do with our time as entrepreneurs need to maximize the money once we've made the money. Like there's lots of cool stuff you can do that would be very meaningful, or maybe even
Yeah.
as a business venture, but it's not going to pay off for 10 years. Like all the videos you made early in your career, Michael, I'm sure, you put a ton of time, putting every single YouTube video in, and it didn't pay off right
Mm-mm.
away for me either. I
No.
wrote, hundreds of thousands of words on my blog. And so these passion projects, these things that you want to do, they become possible when you have an income floor, because you separated this need for you to go have to work a job or work a flipping job, flipping houses or whatever you want to do. It's totally separating all that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all that. The other thing I want to go back to, you talked about Mike Cantu down in Southern California. It's if I remember his story correctly, he was a professional skateboarder
Yes.
for a long
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
I love how he allocates property. Like that's my PG&E or my utilities bill. That's my car payment. I love how he kind of breaks that down in his stories.
And it's so simple, but it's also practical, because think about inflation. Like, the cost of groceries
Yeah.
go up, the rent on his rental goes up. I mean, well, in California, that's limited a little bit in some places, right? But that you bump that rent up over time, and it's also inflation adjusted. So it's super simple, but it's also very practical.
Yeah. The other thing I love about this story, this income floor, this pension idea, is it really helps me put a finishing touch on the story, right? We talk about getting to 4, we talk about 10 years, we do all of these things. But that little pivot or twist about it becoming something that most people know about pensions is just a really elegant solution, right? Hey, you're going to work for 10 years no matter what. Why don't you work 10 years and create your own pension outside of your 401k, outside of any stock plan with the employer, outside of Social Security? And oh, by the way, here's another beauty of the pension idea. I started cashing my pension at 45.
Yeah.
Not a bad deal.
37 for me. So
Oh,
yeah.
you show off.
We like to have little competitions here.
Yeah, you clearly ran me in circles. That's awesome. I'm
No,
so
but
happy for you.
I also had a lower number. I live in Clemson, South Carolina. So, if I were in California, I'd probably still be working. Right?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Good for you. But that pension idea is beautiful, folks. So again, you got to get started. You own assets. Inflation's a feature, not a bug. You got to be in it for 10 years. But this idea of converting it to this income floor is awesome. What else? What kind of closing thoughts on this? It's pretty powerful.
I think there's the tactics, and then there's just the mindset of saying, this is something I want to do. And they're both important. We'll come back and I'll talk about the tactics a lot, and I'm happy to do that. But I think the bigger shift is, particularly those of you who are already in the game. Like, these are the people I always get pushback from. You're already in the game. You already have a lot of properties, and if you're like me, I'm a type A go-getter kind of person. It's hard for you to get off that treadmill, and that treadmill, that growth treadmill you're on, is just as arbitrary as any other treadmill. And that doesn't make it a bad thing, but it's like, whether you have 20 million, 100 million, 5 million, like, all those numbers are going to work. Okay. So it's like the question, the kind of philosophy that I'm trying to put out here is, why not secure the downside? Why not secure going backwards? And then if Michael Zuber and I are talking we're both in our 80s, and Michael's like, well, I've got 50 million, and Chad's like, oh crap, I've got 30 million, like, is that really going to make a difference? Like, is that going to, what difference is that going to make in my life at that point? But if one of us, if I said, hey, Michael, you've got 50 million and I've got 0, or I've got, went back to 0, that makes a huge difference. And so that's really what we're talking about.
Well, let's add the third variable. Let's just say, for whatever reason, my only goal is to become a billionaire, and I spend the next 50 years and I get to 100 million. But you have this downside protection, and you spend the next 50 years doing what you love and what you enjoy. I guarantee you, when I get on my deathbed, I will have plenty of regrets of things I didn't do, because I can't take it with me. You're going to have a lot of amazing stories and probably very little regrets. And any regrets you have aren't going to be monetary. That's what we're playing for here, folks. You don't have to become a billionaire. You don't have to become 100 million. Get to your number, know your numbers, and then enjoy life. We only get one go around. Pretty powerful stuff.
I can't improve on that. That's exactly right.
There you go. Where can they get your books?
The book, The Small and Mighty Investor, and both Retire Early with Real Estate's my first book. Those are both on Amazon. You can check them out. They're on Audible. I actually read the first one. They didn't let me read the second one. So if you want to hear my Southern accent, you have to listen to Retire Early with Real Estate on Audible. You can also get it at Bigger Pockets as well. Both books will be there.
There you go, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Michael.